Hello builders, my name is G. As promised, episode 3.5 of the Backend Example. There were some people in the comments who asked me to do this. I promised them that I would create this episode. Today, we're going to be transitioning our tRPC implementation that had the classic React Query implementation and transition it to use Tanstack Query instead. That seems to be the recommended version, and personally, I like using Tanstack Query as much as possible. And so let's jump right into the code and start that migration. Real quick at the start here, I actually went back through the project and changed the structure a little bit. So what I did was, in the old implementation, we had a server directory and a tRPC directory. What I did was pulled the DB directory with drizzle and schema.ts out of the server here and put it at the source level. So you can see here that it's source/db. I moved server inside of the tRPC folder, moved the client.tsx into this client directory, and since we had client/client.tsx, I renamed this to index.tsx, and then moved the query client.ts into there. Inside of the server, everything should be the same. Just move the DB out of it. And we have our index.tsx here for the server side. We also have the init.ts, and we have all of our routers. So that's our new structure as we're going to be doing our migration. So over to the documentation. Real quick at the start here, I actually went back through the project and changed the structure a little bit. So what I did was, in the old implementation, we had a server directory and a tRPC directory. What I did was pulled the DB directory with drizzle and schema.ts out of the server here and put it at the source level. So you can see here that it's source/db. I moved server inside of the tRPC folder, moved the client.tsx into this client directory, and since we had client/client.tsx, I renamed this to index.tsx, and then moved the query client.ts into there. Inside of the server, everything should be the same. Just move the DB out of it. And we have our index.tsx here for the server side. We also have the init.ts, and we have all of our routers. So that's our new structure as we're going to be doing our migration. So over to the documentation. Okay, gold star to everyone if you made it this far in the video. Thank you so much for watching. So one of the things that we have to do is change out our dependencies. So these are the dependencies that we're actually going to be using. And if I pull up the code again, what we're going to do first is to go into our package.json and start looking for stuff that we don't need, just so that I can note it all. I know that there's probably many elegant ways to remove this, but we're just basically seeing, okay, out of all of these, what is the extra stuff here? So we have tRPC server, that's here. We have the client, which is here. This also has the side effect of letting you see what versions I'm using. So in case it doesn't work for you in the future, I didn't break it, they did. So don't blame me. We need this at tRPC/Tanstack React Query, and we need to remove this. So that's basically, pretty much from what I can see, the only changes that are 100% necessary. So let's do that. We'll remove this, and all that we're going to do is copy this command. They don't have a copy button, unfortunately. We're going to go into our terminal here and do np, oh, I think they already have it in the command. Yes, they do. So we're just going to hit enter there, let it run. They also have a little migrate page here, right, from the classic React client. And so I guess technically we could have ran this as well. Instead of doing all that, when we think about our queries here, that's what the classic query looks like. If we looked at ours, something very similar is there in the home contents, right? Yep. So you can see there, tRPC, the router, in this case it's greeting, and then use query. I split it out into a router, so that's what the extra piece is. They don't have a router here, but they have the name of the API route here That's greeting in their case. Ours is get user, and then we have a query, and then we pass in an object for any inputs that need to be provided. What that changes to now is that we use a hook here, use tRPC, that we're going to have within our tRPC implementation. So we're going to add that a little bit later. And we're going to be calling, if you've used Tanstack React Query before, we're going to use the use query function and then pass in basically everything up to use query. Instead of using use query, we're going to do use options instead. And on the, let's see here, invalidate. Yep, so if we need to invalidate any part of our API calls, so if we've updated the name here, and so instead of use query, where's the mutation? Right here. They should have put mutations first. So if we do a mutation, and I don't think I've included that in this tutorial, but if we wanted to change the value in our backend example, we would do use mutate. Instead, right, we're going to use the same hook, which is why the implementation, in my opinion, is so much better. We're going to use mutation from Tanstack React Query and then provide the mutation options from our API to this use mutations, and then using this variable that we created, be able to mutate or call our mutation and provide the inputs of what we want to change. And then after we've changed something, we've got to update our state on our application to basically say that, hey, our API call that we've had here, where we got the name Jerry here, and I guess they should have changed it to something else in this example, like Tom or something, right? Tom and Jerry. If we changed it to Tom, then we need to obviously invalidate our name to something else. So, yeah, that's the basic implementation there. So we go back to the setup there, installing our app router. So that's in utils.trpc, but that's that's a type. So if we go back to this and we go back to our router here, we already have this here. So they're just asking to import it. But we basically have this here. So that should be fine. Next step here, set up the tRPC context provider. So instead of let's see here, in our so this is on the yeah, the documentation is not the most clear here, but thankfully you have me to handle that. So this tRPC React here, we're basically switching that out for tRPC, create tRPC context. And so we're going to do create tRPC context here, and the import, right, is just an extra Tanstack in front of this React query. Clears out that mistake, and then, or that error, and then we're going to just paste this here. But we actually extract a bunch of things. So instead of exposing the tRPC object directly, instead we are pulling out the pieces that we need. But I'm going to deviate a little bit from the documentation here because, as you can see, what they're trying to do is smush all of these functions that we've spread out into other files into our app folder, or into our app file. I'd much prefer them to actually stay where our hook is at and keep all of our tRPC related code together. Makes it a lot easier for us to be able to find it, not actually go into our really our layout, because that's where we generally provide our providers. And so, you know, it'd be a lot better to, you know, just keep them all together in a separate place and then just provide a minimal hook to use in our actual code. So what we're going to do is we are going to grab use tRPC and use tRPC client. That's the only thing that we're going to extract here. Whoops. What did I do? Oh, I just went to the top. And then we're going to add those two things in there. Make query we have in our query clients file here, right? There's make client, and everything I believe should look decently similar. We have some extra stuff in there actually, but we added that to support super JSON, I believe. Yep, that's not there, and some things about the prefetching, right, and being able to use super JSON. And super JSON was about formatting our API calls. A lot of the times, right, date objects don't line up. Sometimes they're transferred in string format, and then you have to create a new date object to be able to hold that string, because in JSON we're not able to hold those date objects. And so super JSON just helps a little bit with us moving that data around. So we're using that there as a reminder. The other part they provided here was the tRPC provider, but we already declared ours down here. Now the declaration for it looks a little bit different based off of the code that you can kind of see here. And so let's look at some of the main differences. So first, query client provider here on the outside, we're just going to follow it. I don't think that there's a big problem, but just in case that there is, we're going to follow it verbatim. And we need tRPC provider. So actually, let's see here. We'll extract that. tRPC provider. We are exporting it. So we're going to do our tRPC provider here, but we're just going to rename it real quick to tRPC React provider, because if we don't do that, we're going to have a name collision here. So we're going to grab this, this right here, and go down, rename this part here, tRPC React provider. Do the same thing in this closing tag here. Instead of client here, we're going to use tRPC client. So make sure that you have two C's there, right? tRPC and then client, which takes in our tRPC client that we created here. And inside of this tRPC, we need to use, let's see here, create tRPC client, which we are grabbing from here, this HTTP batch link. So create tRPC client. We add that to this import statement here. L goes before O, so we'll bring it up one. And instead of using this tRPC dot client create client, we're going to pass this here. And let's see here. Anything else that I have to change? Oh, yep. I need to provide the app router here. And everything's kosher. And this is, again, just another IntelliSense error. There we go. And then here, yeah, it's going to be complaining, hey, tRPC doesn't exist anymore. We'll get to that in a second. We have to go over to our server implementation. So basically, I didn't change too much here. Instead, I just kept everything that I had before in place that worked for React Query, but just added in the stuff that was Tanstack React Query specific. I know a lot of this is really confusing because they use React Query in both sides, but in this case, right, we're using Tanstack for everything related to React Query, so it makes it a little bit easier. I also noticed that we have two imports here. But one's a type, one's a normal. And, you know, it's fine separating those out. I think they just did that in the code, and I did the same. So let's just tab this out, make it look nice, do a once over. I think everything looks good. So let's move on to the next part of the documentation. So let's see here. Yeah, we don't need to worry about that. Server components, right? Because we were using server components before. And so I believe they have Zod client only and server only, but we already have those installed. We can go back to our package.json just to check. We have Zod here, we have server only and client only. So we already have all that stuff installed, so we don't need to worry too much about that. We obviously have an issue here. So what is the proper import statement here? They have a sample backend here. But I believe everything should be similar. Yeah, that looks the same. That looks the same. Let me check on inside of our API. API, tRPC. Do we name it the right way? Yep. Route. No changes there. Inside of this. We'll change that in a second. Well, actually, all we need to do is just remove this. It seems to not be able to find it. Let me just check. Oh, sorry. The wrong tRPC. I deleted the wrong tRPC here. We need this part here. Extract that. Spit that there. Okay. All right, that's clear. So if we go back to the documentation, right? So all this stuff we verified to be correct. We've already dealt with the client side already in the initial setup. If you want more of an explanation, you can go over to the documentation to take a look at it. We've already created a tRPC client. We have our providers already set up. Next, we need to see if we need to make any modifications to the server side. So let's jump into that. Where would that be? Index server. So yep, we have some issues here, and so we need to use create tRPC options proxy. This here, we don't have to call it here because our router is not on a separate server. So if you were using like a Next.js application or a Node.js application that is running on a separate server, then you'll need to add this extra bit here. If you're not, then we just need to make sure that we have this stuff. We use cache from React, which we have here. So what do we have to change here? Get query, make query. So that this part is the same. We don't use this caller anymore, so we can get rid of that. And so we need to create, and I guess I'll just copy paste this from the documentation here. Remove this portion, paste it in there. So we have tRPC. We need to add in create tRPC options proxy. So that should just import in there. And let's remove the stuff that we don't longer need. So the hydration helpers, we're not going to use that. We're not going to use this create caller factory from init. So honestly, in init, where do we use that? Create caller factory. I guess technically we could remove this from the init. They don't mention the init folder. I don't see it anywhere in this part. So, you know, I won't make the change if you know, I don't think it's expressed here, but I think that's something that's now extraneous. And so we don't need to do this again, not on a separate server. And so we're good. I think we have all of our files all set up. If you need a once over look, I'll just go through a little bit slowly, so just so you can take a look at the code. Most of it should be the same except for this get URL function is inside of the client index, and then the singleton and the get query here are inside of the index as well. We have the query client that's also in its own separate folder here, instead of like how they expressed it in the documentation. Actually, no, yeah, it does match here, but it doesn't match the setup documentation that they have here, where it's you know, the get query client, make query client is next to the app. I adopted this version where everything is in client.tsx. Your get query client, get URL, your provider, all inside of here. And then make query client is separate. I don't think they have, oh, here it is, this query client factory that they have in their separate query clients file. I put it with the client directory here. They just put it at the tRPC level. For server, I think they just smush everything into one function, I believe. I kind of split these things out. So, you know, personal preference, whatever you like to do. I think that this structure makes the most sense to me. We've already discussed this. And so, yeah, I think everything should be the same in this implementation here. So now we can move on to changing our use case or our usage of the API. So the two operative files here is the home and the home contents. So since I separate out, just to make it in this example, a client component that has a separate boundary from a server component, that's kind of the page here. And so we can't use this syntax anymore. It's not in this tRPC server, in the tRPC server client. So we have to prefetch in a different way now. And so if we go to the documentation here, we need to create an instance of the query client using this function here, get query client. It's going to be grabbed from @/tRPC/server. We use the @ instead of the tilde here, so make sure that you do change that. I'll discuss hydration and dehydration in a little bit, but for now, let's get the const query client is equal to get query client, and we're just grabbing that from @/tRPC/server. So that's just a function call there, and then we're going to call the prefetch query function here. So void query client dot prefetch query, and IntelliSense is kind of, or Copilot's getting all that stuff, but I want to make sure that I get it right. So there's no array or object as they're putting here. We need to actually grab this thing that we have here and put it in here. Now it's going to be a little bit different because we're not going to call this prefetch function, obviously. Whoops. Instead, we're going to grab our query options, and this is a function, right? And for the input, we're going to have to do the exact same user ID. And what was the user ID here? Sorry, I totally lost it. I think the autocomplete was correct, but I'll just copy paste it. So that's what it's supposed to look like there. And so yeah, we're just grabbing this part here, but now it has query options, and it's not prefetching anymore. We have our query client to manage our prefetching. We don't need this part anymore. And that's what our server component now looks like, matches partially what they have in the documentation. Now we have to add in the hydration boundary. So you might have seen like the hydration error of how your render is being set up on the server side. You might have a hydration error if on the client side in the browser has something different than what is being inspected in the server. If those things don't match up, you get a hydration error. So in this case, we're just providing a hydration boundary so that everything's ready on the server side, and then when we're ready to render, we can hydrate, quote unquote, our what we're going to render when the query client here provides. So hopefully that's a clear explanation. If not, feel free to look at the documentations. And honestly, this is more of a on the Tanstack side. So going over to the Tanstack documentation and looking at the React Query implementation, you'll see more details about the hydration boundary. And I'll put links to that in the description. So we're going to basically copy this portion here. And going back to here, we need to nest our home contents inside of this. So we're going to just stick this here, put home contents inside of it. And I think that's, oh, they have a little, yeah, so that's the inner thing. So client greeting in this example is the same thing as our home contents. A example, oh, weird. Let me just order these in ABC order, and also get dehydrate. And so that actually pushes this one to the top. So this is our client component. So that kind of matches their implementation here. Obviously, we have an error. tRPC is not available in the client here because we provide a hook, use tRPC. That's how we get access to the tRPC object. And so const tRPC is equal to use tRPC, not the client. Don't grab that one. Use this one, right? That's the correct hook. We can remove this from our import. And so obviously this tRPC is not used in the same way. If we look at it, we use the use query hook from Tanstack React Query. So what we're going to do is really just actually, I'll comment this out because we're going to use the user ID a little bit later. But const, and let's just look at how they're structuring it, right? Or rather, they don't destructure it, so they just keep it all contained into one thing, right? So if we do just user email, I believe that was like the piece of information that we're getting back. We're going to do use query, grabbing it from at Tanstack React Query, and then what is being put inside? Everything as we did in here. We're just going to copy everything up until the use query, and then provide query options instead. And then just provide an object of what the inputs are supposed to be. And so, user ID that. The stall time is if you want to provide like a little delay. I hate when Copilot does that. All right, there we go. I think everything looks correct. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to keep that together. So cool. If we hover over use email here, or actually, better yet, we got to replace these. So user email dot, right? And we have so much stuff here. So that's why you can have it all contained in one object if you're fine with it looking like this. User email dot error. I think user email, I think it's now not use loading. Oh, there is use loading. You can use loading or use pending. Use pending, I usually use that for mutations. So I think use loading is the correct one for queries. This error message here, I believe, is user email dot error dot message now. And then if user email just does not exist in general, which I believe, if we actually hover over this, there's no, there's no, it doesn't return null like it used to here. And so really this part here, not really a concern. And so we're going to use user email instead. And it needs a type. So we have data and then data.email. Right? And so actually, that reminds me. Yes, the user email is not null. But what could potentially be, and else if user email dot data, and then we're just going to not that. And then if that does not exist, then obviously we have no data. Or I think it was just like an error, no data. But yeah. So basically, that's how we use it, and we should be getting the same result. So let's run npm run dev. Let me verify. I keep saying that I'm going to, but I keep forgetting. I need to verify that the neon, I didn't shut down that neon DB by accident. If not, then I'll reset it all up and run through the example here. But let's just do npm run dev and get ready to go over to localhost 3000. Okay, so the neon DB is confirmed to be still active. I actually need to shut it off. So I will try to do that after I finish recording this. But all we're going to do is, whoops, sorry, a little bit too big, log in here. So we're going to just do it with Google. Use my personal email there. And we log in, and we can get home, welcome to the home page, and the actual email corresponding to our user ID. So it's the exact same thing. Everything works the same. Now, if you go into inspect element, let me see if I can actually reproduce this. Yes. So it says actually that there's a hydration error here. It failed because, as I was talking about before, if we have things pre-rendered on the server and in the server component, it might be a mismatch with what's on the client based off of our if conditions here. So really, this isn't actually a great way to handle these error and loading states anymore. we need to be able to do it in a different way. Thankfully, in React, we have different ways of tackling it, and it's around this hydration boundary. There's two things that we want to think about. There's a component here called suspense, and another one called error boundary, and we actually need to install that library. So let me just go real quick. React error boundary. Pull up its npm here, just so that everyone knows which one we're using here. It's just a reusable React error boundary, the bog standard typical one. So we're just going to copy the installation command here, turn off our server real quick, paste this command in here to install it. And so we're going to import error boundary. It does not automatically import, which I'm not too happy about. So we're just going to pull import error boundary from, oh my gosh, if I could spell, React error boundary. There we go. And then we're going to pull this up here. And so both of these take in the same thing. Oh, we got to put our home contents in the middle here. Yeah, so that everything should be good. Both of these need a prop to be provided called fallback. And so that can just be as easy as providing the loading state here. And for the error side, we have also the same thing, fallback here. And we can just provide it with a something went wrong. And I don't know why it switched over to render. We just want fallback here. So we have our two states here. We removed it from here. So if we go back to our application here, oh, we got to run it first. npm run dev. If we go back to our website real quick, just hit refresh here. Oh no, we still have another error. Oh no, I thought, all this stuff was supposed to fix it. Well, if we're using suspense here, we can't be using this normal use query. Instead, we're going to have to do use suspense query. And I think that kind of makes sense for you to understand why. If we're using suspense over here, then we got to use the use suspense query. If we weren't having these loading states, then we can just use the regular use query instead. But now if we go back, we hit refresh, no more errors. Cool. So successfully, we've been able to go in, migrate all of our files here within our tRPC over to using Tanstack React Query instead of the classic implementation. And hopefully it shows you also how to deal with loading states and the error boundary as needed. And so, yeah, hopefully this was a really clear and interesting tutorial. Please comment down below if you want me to, work on some other things related to backends and working with tRPC, Tanstack React Query, anything that was a little bit confusing for you that you need me to clarify. Comment it down below. If you have any suggestions for what other tutorial I'd like to do, happy to take requests in the comments. So feel free to provide them down below. If you like this video, please, I'd appreciate a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to know when the next video on this channel related to tech, startups, gaming, whatever, is out. I thank you so much for watching. And just remember, if G can build, so can you. Until next time, thanks for watching.